I'm done talking about last year. Last year. Moving on to this season, and whatever happened last year is what happened last year. Can't do anything for me, but just continue to get it better.
Jaden Daniels yesterday at Minicamp. When asked about whether or not last year will serve as motivation for this upcoming season, he said he's done talking about last year. He is moving on. Good morning, everybody. More on that coming up here in the opening segment. The U.S. Open is underway at Shinnecock Hills in the Hamptons, the lovely Hamptons. Fog delays all morning long, but they're underway. We'll keep you posted on the leaderboard throughout the show. We'll talk about Trey Young opting out of his player option for next year and tell you what that means less than a week before the draft. More soccer talk on the show today. Yes. The Nats' 4-game win streak came to an end yesterday, losing to the Royals. The schedule gets a bit more difficult now for the Nats. A series against Tampa and Philadelphia looms. And then we've got where we're going to start today with some follow-up conversation to yesterday's talk amongst ourselves about our quarterback. Remember, yesterday we did a call segment, if you missed it, where essentially I asked all of you guys whether or not you were able to kind of describe the kind of season that Jaden Daniels would need to have next year or this upcoming season to make you think that what you thought at the end of 2024 was true, was accurate. 2024, the end of that season, I think we were all bought in. I think we were all where, we should have been, which is that was just the greatest season in the history of the NFL for a rookie quarterback. An actual rookie quarterback strapped the team to his back and took him to the title game in their conference, the NFC. That's the first time that had ever happened. Yes, rookie quarterbacks had been in championship games previously, but they were all defensive-led championship efforts or running game-led championship efforts. No one had ever done what Jaden Daniels did in 2024, which is be the best player on a team that made it to the NFC championship game, with that best player being a rookie quarterback. They had a terrible defense in 2024, and the supporting cast was mediocre on offense, to say the least. And my answer was that I don't really have a description of what I'll need to see from Jaden Daniels in 2026 to make me think about the way I felt at the end of 2024, because I never left the end of 2024. I'm still at the end of 2024 because I barely saw my quarterback of 2024 play in 2025. So there's no reason for me to jump ship. Now, there was one specific thing that I would like to see growth, and I mentioned that yesterday, and I've mentioned that previously, and that area of growth needs to be some level of maturity when it comes to decision-making as a runner. Do I treat 1st and 10 in a scoreless first quarter the same way that I treat 4th and 5 down by 7 with 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter? No, you can't do that. He's been doing that. He did that in his rookie season, and in the very little action that he was involved in last year, he did it again. He treated every single play as if it was life and death. And by doing that, he puts himself at risk physically unnecessarily. So I'd like to see some growth there. I don't think that, Jaden Daniels needs to get an extra 2 yards on 1st and 10 midway through the first quarter when there's an opportunity to slide and get down or get out of bounds and not take a hit. That's the area that I'd like to see some growth. But in terms of what I need to see to put me back in the same frame of mind as it relates to how I feel about Jaden Daniels at the end of 2024, I don't need to see much. I never left the end of 2024. And several of you seem to think that I am insane. This from Frank. Kevin, man, you really love Jaden Daniels. I'm not sure I've ever heard you fawn over a player like him. If you're serious that you're not worried about anything and you don't need to see anything to remind you of 2024, I can't help you. Thank you for that, Frank. This from Rob T. Rob T writes, Kevin, I think you've officially become a bigger apologist for Jaden than you ever were for Kirk Cousins. To actually say out loud that nothing that happened last year changed your mind about his future standing as an elite quarterback, elite QB in all caps. Rob T put it in all caps. He writes, I hope you've properly broken the news to your old boyfriend, Kurt, K-U-R-T. Yeah, thank you for listening to the show, Rob and Frank, and several others who thought I was a bit off my rocker. Look, I do absolutely understand the concern, the hesitation about his health and how it will play out in the future. And it all stems really from not just what happened last year, but that was one of the concerns about Jaden Daniels coming into the NFL. Not because of a track record of being hurt, because he played 52 of 54 games in college at Arizona State and LSU, but because his frame looked, breakable, especially with the way we expected him to play, which was going to be as a quarterback that used his legs a lot and was involved a lot in using his legs in the run game. And I think there was some, that was my number one issue. I didn't have any other issues with Jaden Daniels coming out of LSU. The discussion about things like, sack percentage and can't throw the ball over the middle with anticipation. I didn't think any of that was true. I think there were reasons that statistically some of that stuff looked like it might be true. But if you watched the tape or if you watched the games, you understood there was a lot of context to a lot of that. Yes, his, sack percentage, drop back sack percentage was, high early in his career, but it was also, if you looked at the lost yardage on sacks, it was the lowest of any of the quarterbacks in the draft that year because a lot of those weren't true sacks. They were recorded as sacks, but they were plays in which he extended, and then jumped out of bounds a yard short of the line of scrimmage. That's -1. It's called a sack. Or it was about to be a 12-yard loss, but he moved around, he made people miss, and he got it back to, a yard or two short of the line of scrimmage. Sack. That was real context to it. The number of third down opportunities at LSU his senior year, they had fewer third down attempts than any team in the country. When do you typically see a lot of, down the field, medium level to longer level throws over the middle of the field? When you absolutely have to have them on third down. Well, they didn't face a lot of third downs. So he didn't have as many attempts on those throws. Obviously, all of that was put to rest with a rookie year in which he did everything at a high level. Deep ball, check. Medium level, check. Short throws, check. Decision-making, except for the running in certain situations, check. Explosiveness, check. Progression, defense reading, check. Throws with anticipation, check. Everything. High level. Then we got later into the season. Clutch factor, check. Wins big games, check. Comes up big in big games, check. All of it. That's where I still am. I'm still there. Because as I've said ad nauseum, and I understand that a lot of you have gotten frustrated with this, I didn't get a chance to see the 2024 Jaden Daniels play enough in 2025. He only played in 4 complete football games, start to finish. He only participated in 7 out of the 17. And in most of those games, he didn't have his best players on the team around him, including his best receiver, Terry McLaurin, except for 2 games, the first 2 of the year, the Giants and the Packers. So, yeah, that's why I am where I am. I'm not an apologist for him. I'm not fawning over him, in my opinion. Now, I do like him. There's no doubt. I'm a big Jaden Daniels fan. I've been a big Jaden Daniels fan going back to his junior year at LSU. Can't tell you that I was much of a fan when he was at Arizona State. I remember him at Arizona State. But when he beat Bama in that game in Death Valley in his junior year at LSU, and he was spectacular in that game from that moment on, and then every single game his senior year was must watch. It was truly some of the most incredible play by a quarterback, dual threat I've ever seen. And that team, I'm telling you, that LSU team, if it had had just a bad defense instead of an atrocious defense, it would have been in the playoff. Speaking of that, real quickly, I just wanted to mention Joe Burrow yesterday said about his Cincinnati Bengals in the upcoming season, 2026, that this team that he's about to play on is giving him 2019 LSU vibes. A lot of striking similarities. There's greatness in this Cincinnati Bengals team. For those of you who don't know, the 2019 LSU National Championship team is one of the greatest college football teams in the history of the sport. Joe Burrow had arguably the greatest season at quarterback any college quarterbacks ever had. Cincinnati compared to LSU of 2019, my man's putting some stuff out there in Cincinnati. Now, I think the Bengals, as long as he's available, are always going to be a team that is, worth paying attention to. The problem with Joe Burrow is in his 6 NFL seasons, he's only played 3 of them start to finish. Just 3. 2021 when they went to the Super Bowl, 2022, and 2024. 2024, they didn't make the postseason. They were 9-8. They missed the postseason on the final game of the year because they had the worst defense in the NFL. I think Washington's defense was, pretty close to it. The 2024 Cincinnati team is, to me, what Washington would have been last year, 9-8, 8-9, something like that, had Jaden Daniels actually played all 17 games. Because they would have had a decent offensive football team, but they were just so bad defensively that it was too hard to get to that 10th or 11th win and get into the postseason. That was Cincinnati of 2024. But Joe Burrow, comparing his upcoming Cincinnati season to the 2019 LSU Tigers. Wow. I think about that division, and I do like thinking about other teams around the NFL as well. But for the most part, it's the same situation. We're not really going to know until they start playing games. But I'll tell you, there is a team in that division that I picked last year to win the division, and it did, the Pittsburgh Steelers, that everybody is down on this year. Nobody's picking Pittsburgh this year. Not many people picked them last year either. Okay, but there's always, and there was always the feeling with Mike Tomlin that, they're going to probably have a winning record with Tomlin. I actually like some of the things they did in the offseason. It's Mike McCarthy's first year. He's reuniting with Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers played well last year. I thought he was a big part of why Pittsburgh was able to win the division. They didn't win a playoff game. It was a bad matchup against that Houston defense. It was a bad matchup for sure. I still like Pittsburgh in that division. I am definitely, Max, going to be on the outside of my AFC North prediction when we get to the first week in September. because I'm telling you right now, I'm going to pick Pittsburgh to win the division again. But let me just say that Cincinnati's talent and what they did defensively in terms of the additions that they made, they added Dexter Lawrence. They did a lot of what Washington did. They said, we are terrible on defense. We have to invest in our defense. Now, they traded Trey Hendrickson, but they added Boye Mafe from Seattle. They added Dexter Lawrence in a trade with the Giants. They actually added Jonathan Allen. John didn't play that poorly in Minnesota, and they have turned over their defense a little bit. They still have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, who was banged up last year. They've added a couple of offensive linemen to try to strengthen that area of the team. Clearly, like our team, really, Cincinnati and Washington are very similar. If Joe Burrow suits up and plays all 17 games and he's healthy, you would expect them to win more games than they lose and very much be in the playoff mix. I think that about our team. I don't think everybody thinks that about our team. That's fine. We don't have Chase and Higgins. There is a big difference offensively. I get that. But I do think if Jaden suits up and plays all 17, the chances are better than not that they'll win more games than they lose. Will it be enough to win 10 or 11 and make the postseason? That'll be determined by whether or not they are better defensively, because they were horrendous defensively last year. I thought that was interesting. Burrow. That's not typical Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is confident. He described himself in this offseason as being meaner than usual, being more demanding than usual. Something about Joe Burrow that I like a lot. Not just his play. That'll be an interesting team. But back to Jaden, yeah, I'm a big fan. I've been a big fan. I absolutely don't think that what I saw in 2024 was an aberration. I don't think it was a one-off. If you told me he had a solid year and they got to the NFC Championship game because the team was really good around him, there may be a different feel. But what I watched with my own eyes in 2024 wasn't fake. It was more than anything else, the quarterback as a rookie leading this football team that was very average around him and in fact pretty bad on defense to an NFC title game with 2 road playoff wins. And down the stretch, we talked about this yesterday, but just for emphasis, down the stretch, playing some really good defensive teams. I mean, they played Philadelphia, remember, 3 times in the second half of that season. So Philadelphia was the best defensive team in the league. It wasn't even close by the time we got to late in the season. And in one particular memorable outing against the best defense in football, yeah, they may have lost Jalen Hurts during that game in Landover in December of 2024. But they still had that defense because Jalen Hurts didn't play defense. And Jaden Daniels threw 5 touchdown passes, had a 95.7 QBR, led them to 22 points in the fourth quarter in an incredible comeback, 36-33 win. I mean, Philly didn't give up anything like that year down the stretch. That defense was dominant. Kansas City couldn't get the ball beyond midfield until late in the third quarter in the Super Bowl with Mahomes. Yeah, I'm not smoking anything. I have all the faith and all the belief in Jaden Daniels, playing the way he played in 2024. If he's available to play, that's the key. He's got to be healthy enough to play. And I'm going to go based on history, not based on, some sort of recency bias. The recency bias is every time we watched Washington last year, he was either getting hurt in the game or wasn't in the game because he was hurt. Well, that wasn't the case the year before. He played in all 20 football games, started 20 football games. Yeah, there were a few injuries. There was the rib injury. There was the Carolina, long run that ended in the rib injury. All right. And he was, he was hurting for a little while, but he played and started 20 games and he started 52 of 54 college games. So I'll go with that. I'll go with much more data that says he's not injury prone until proven otherwise. And I do have my fingers crossed on that because I think if he plays 17 games, they're going to be a good football team, a much better football team than a lot of people think they will be. There were a couple of other things that Jaden Daniels said yesterday in his press conference. Minicamp wraps up today, and then that'll be it until training camp. Also, Dan Quinn did a sit-down interview with CBS's Evan Washburn, and I thought there was a really interesting 2 or 3 minutes from that I want to play for you on the show today. All right. The show is underway. We'll keep you posted on the U.S. Open. Is that Graham McDowell that's 2 under?
That it is.
Yeah. How old is he now? He's a former U.S. Open champion. He is 2 under through just 3 holes as the U.S. Open at one of the iconic U.S. Open golf courses, Shinnecock, is underway.
I mean, we only just installed how many ever practices. I know we got a lot more to go, but just built the foundation, man. You just keep building off of it.
Jaden Daniels yesterday talking about the offense that's getting installed and saying that he's got a long way to go on this thing. He said part of the quote that I don't think we played there, he said, quote, "I still got a long way to go. I mean, we only just installed how many of our practices? We got a lot more to go." Hey, no kidding. It's only June 18th. They don't play a game for roughly 3 months. So no need to panic yet that they got a long way to go. They should have a long way to go. Chase Hughes from Monumental is going to join us at 11 to talk to us about Trae Young declining his player option for next year. I don't think that's a big deal, but we'll get Chase to weigh in on it. And to talk a little bit about a draft that really does have people perplexed in the business as to what will happen at the top of the draft. This is not, your Victor Wembanyama, Cooper Flag type of, foregone conclusion in terms of who's going number one. And the Wizards have been very, very, very locked up. I was watching Brian Windhorst this morning on ESPN. By the way, I'm a fan of old Windy, as Greeny calls him. I think Windhorst is great. I think he's very likable. I think he gives you great information. And he said that the Wizards are as locked up in terms of trying to find out information from them than they've ever been. And nobody really knows what they're going to do. And that includes players like DeBonsa and Peterson and Boozer and their agents. They don't know what the Wizards are going to do. We'll find out Tuesday night at around 8 o'clock what they will do. But I have a feeling we won't find out until then. But looking forward to that. And we will have intense discussion on Monday and Tuesday's show about what they should do. Let me just give you a heads up. I am starting to come back to Darren Peterson a bit. I'm concerned about him. I have a lot of questions about him, and I was very critical of him during the college basketball season. But the more and more I think about it and the more and more I go back and just kind of see some of the stuff popping up on Peterson for some of the games that he played in, man, his upside is for real, for real. And so is DeBonce's. It is. But we will come to a conclusion on the player that we would take and the player we think they will take early next week. All right. So Jaden Daniels also said something about just growing into in year 3 more of a leader. This is what he said.
I mean,
the last couple of weeks, several of your teammates have mentioned that you've grown as a leader. How have you tried to establish that here?
I think it just comes with maturity and what I've built, like the calluses I have from my rookie year, my second year, and just go out there and be intentional with everything I do.
You mentioned calluses. What are those calluses?
Man, I mean, experience within the games, experience of what I've seen, how I want to route ran and things like that. And kind of just, like I said, being intentional with everything that we got going on.
I watched Jaden's press conference yesterday like I did the one from OTAs a couple of weeks ago. And there is definitely a level of confidence and comfort in that situation that I think I am seeing more so than he had last year or the year before. He is older. It is his third year in the NFL. He's been through a lot of these interviews and these pressers. He knows what's coming. He's more comfortable, though, and more confident in his answers. I am always impressed with him during these things, not because he's like a dynamic communicator, because that's not what I would, that's not how I would describe him. But I think he is absolutely, quick and understands what to say and how, and from his standpoint, how to say it. And I think he's becoming more comfortable in that. There you go. My fawning over Jaden Daniels. continues. So I wanted to play something from Dan Quinn's interview with Evan Washburn. Evan, does sidelines for CBS, the NFL. Evan, by the way, is a local. I think he may live in Annapolis. I think in Howard County somewhere, maybe further north and closer to Baltimore. But he had a chance for CBS Sports to sit down and do 18, 19 minutes one-on-one with Dan Quinn. And there was this 1 3-minute stretch where focused on what's next. But listen to this 2.5, 3-minute section of the interview between Washburn from CBS and Dan Quinn.
Each year, even here in Washington, had special players.
Yep.
But sometimes years don't go the way you intended. Yep. And I am curious, as part of our discussion on the process of viewing last year's results.
Yep.
On the outside, we can say they had a lot of injuries.
Yep.
From the metrics I saw, from week 1 starters, you lost the most games out of those guys, second most in the league.
Yep.
And there's other areas that come off on paper, but your process is so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
So as we sit here now, even though you're pushing towards 2026, fully understand that, what does best describe the process of examining that so that you can avoid it this season?
I think I can give you 2 examples of that, of some specific things to say in 25, was it as elevated, as desperate, as hungry? And I pulled out some tape from a random 2024 OTA practice and one from a 25 OTA practice. And I showed some of the players this offseason to say, this was a team desperate, and this one wasn't as desperate. And so what a great example. Sometimes you might just be 1 degree off. And then in July, you're this far, August, a little further, and by October, what the hell?
Wow.
And it was such a hard lesson to go through and to learn, but it's also one that I wanted to take the lessons from 25, learn them, and then burn, all the others. In fact, before the new coaches came in here for 26, I took everybody else outside. We wrote some things down on a piece of paper, a couple big, paint stirrers, wrote down some stuff, lit a big fire in one of those big cans, said, all right, what are the things we're leaving behind? There's got to be the lessons that we're taking from this past season, because it wasn't all injury related. We weren't as connected. We weren't as tough. We weren't as clutch. And so some of that's practice, some of that's connection, some of that's, the scheme, the coaching, all of it. You can put everything into one big, pot. But
and you guys literally did that. You
yes.
put things that you wanted to burn from the 25 experience.
And it wasn't fair for any of these new coaches coming in, for them to have any other baggage that we're bringing into this season. There was no chance for that. And so I like developing the coaches. So let's talk about what we didn't like, how we're going to fix it. But we're not bringing this old from 25 into this season with these new coaches that are being a part of this. So the day before they arrived, I did that exercise with the coaches that, were with us the season prior. And I also showed that video that I spoke to you about. I didn't show this year's players. They had nothing to do with them.
Sure.
But I wanted the other players to see, let's make sure the practice here, the competitive nature, that's our standard. That's the most important thing. And so I was going to get that across come hell or high water going into this off season. So when I talked about competition as the central theme, that's where that comes from.
So I really loved this stretch. Ben actually sent it to me last night, and he said, watch this 3-minute stretch of Quinn with Evan Washburn. It's a bit different than what he told me when I kind of asked a very similar question that Evan asked him when he was on with us 2 months ago or whatever it was. when he said it's very hard to evaluate last year because of the injuries, but you have to go back and find out why we had all of those injuries. Was it our practice habits? Was it our training? Was it our conditioning? Was it the way we handled them medically? You know, he focused on, going back and learning why they ended up with the number one injury rate for week one starters in the NFL. Let me just say this, two things. Number one is there is something that I think all of us should learn and take away from what he said. Number two is this is the exact right messaging he should be putting out there. You know, as a talk show host or as fans, we can look at the reality of last year and say, obviously, this was the reason they had all of these injuries. And what he said isn't going to make me change my mind because, the practice habits go back to, maybe OTAs, and he's talking about that, but his best players weren't able to practice. And Terry McLaurin wasn't in any of those practices last year. So having your best players available for those practices and those games may have made a difference. But this is the right messaging from a head coach. You never, as a head coach or an organization, say, well, we've got an excuse. We didn't have our best players on the field. No, you don't say that publicly. You let others say that for you, but you don't say that. Now, the other part of this is there was a specific takeaway that I thought was very interesting. He said that 2025 wasn't as elevated, wasn't as desperate, wasn't as hungry as 2024 was, because he went back and pulled a practice from OTA in 2024 and compared it with a 2025 OTA practice. By the way, this is brilliant coaching. Okay, it is. To go back and say, hey, we didn't have Jaden for 13 games. We didn't have Terry for, 7 games. We didn't have our best players at all, but can't blame it on that because you guys started off with the wrong attitude. You didn't have the same level of desperation that you had the year before. And maybe some of that led to the injuries. Maybe it did. That's hard to prove, but you can certainly sell that as a coach, and you can certainly sell that as a reason for the disastrous season to ensure that they're ready to roll in 2026. And he also took blame himself along with the coordinators and said it wasn't all players. It wasn't all coaching, but it was everything. And I loved when he said, it wasn't all connected. It wasn't all clutch. It wasn't all coaching. And he went through that list. Yeah, it's hard to be connected when your best players aren't on the field. It's hard to be clutch when your number one clutch player isn't in the game. But you should focus on these things as a head coach. You should absolutely try to scare them into, hey, Jaden didn't play much of the season. Terry didn't play. Back and look at the 2025 OTA practice versus the 2024 OTA practice. We didn't approach the season the same way. We have to approach 2026 in a far different way. Look, he's accountable for some of that. He's accountable for the 2025 OTA practice that didn't look like the 2024 OTA practice, especially if it became a consistent theme. You got to fix that. So very introspective from Quinn, very smart from Quinn. In terms of what he did with his team, bringing them in. And then I wonder if that was more metaphor or actual a real thing about sort of tearing up or taking the 2025 OTA stuff and throwing it into a garbage bin that was in flames and burning it literally. I don't know if it was or not. Wouldn't surprise me if they actually had a big trash can with flames shooting out of it that they threw 2025 into. So that was, for him, that was a lot of very good coaching, but a lot of honesty too about the way he thinks last year started. By the way, it's not unusual to have the kind of year that you had in 2024 and come back a little bit fat and happy. You'd like to think that they, to get to fat and happy, that you're fat and happy in part because you're wearing a Super Bowl ring, because you actually accomplished the overall, main goal to win the whole thing, not just to be in the Final Four. But bottom line is, in this town in 2024, it was so unique. It hadn't happened in so long that there was just constant effusive praise for what had happened. And I'm sure they felt it as well. Now, I'm not necessarily one to jump on board with last year was Club Med. Last year was, basically summer camp, arts and crafts, archery, and, big lunches with great big desserts and an ice cream machine. I know a lot of you believe that that's the reason they had all the injuries and that's the reason they ended up at being 5-12. It could have had something to do with it. It could have. It's kind of hard to prove that that's what led to injuries. But at least for those of you that believe that, you got from the head coach that he does think that last year's off season anyway, he didn't necessarily single out training camp. He's, singled out an OTA practice versus another one, 2025 and 2024. But you got from him that he doesn't believe that at least they were ready when everything got started. That the urgency, the elevation, the desperation, the hunger, the connection, it wasn't there. When it comes to not being connected and not being clutch, which he mentioned those two things, again, maybe it's because of the way it started that led to all these players being out. But when your most clutch player isn't in the game, you're probably not going to be as clutch as a team. Number 1 in 2026 is number 5 playing 17 games in the regular season. That's number 1. I'm not saying that all of these other things aren't important, but pretty much 99, 98 teams out of 100, if your best player is your quarterback and he is out, you're doomed. He's got to play. He's got to be available. And I think all will be well. I do think we will be going from week to week with a real feeling that we're good enough offensively and we're good enough at that position to win games. And yes, I've seen the schedule. I know it opens with Philly on the road, Dallas on the road, and then we come home for Seattle. It does look like a brutal 3-game start to the season, but you never know. And every year in the NFL is a different year. And the 3 teams that they're playing, are interesting teams in terms of what you're going to get in 2026 to start the season. Philly, a lot of people think, is due for a step back season. They're still pretty talented, man. Still pretty talented. Dallas, how about George Pickens? We haven't talked about George Pickens. He seems to be totally fine with the franchise tag. He's reporting to all this stuff, and he's ready to roll. Man, I thought last year was his prove-it year, but I guess he's okay with the second prove-it year. I'll tell you what, that speaks to a level of, I think a higher level of how you'd view him than what I think everybody thought would happen, which is, I'm not playing on the tag. I'm not showing up for anything in the offseason. Seattle, can Sam Darnold do what he did last year 2 years in a row? I don't know. Can't wait for the season to start. We are less than 3 months away and counting. September 13th at Philly to open up the season. Want to talk a little bit of soccer when we come back, because I was all in on the soccer for, a second straight day. like the fourth or fifth day out of the last week. But Portugal's got some issues with one of the most famous faces athletically on planet Earth. We'll talk about that next.
Ronaldo chance, a little bit about the space. And Thierry, you had a closer look at it. Let's break it down.
One thing that's important, people, please, at home, the team needs to score, not you needs to score. And I will explain now and go more into details of what Zlatan just explained here. So obviously we're going to see here, Portugal being on the ball, Conceição is going to receive the ball. Cristiano Ronaldo has been in that situation multiple times. If you make that run here, you make the defender take a decision to crash the 6-yard box. But because he wants to score, he goes into the path of Bruno Fernandes. If he goes into that 6-yard box, you've been in that situation, Alexi, you would have had to follow him, and then it would have been a tap-in for Bruno Fernandes. But because he wants to score, he goes into the path of the back pass. You see both players, and it's easier for you to defend. And that's my thing. The team needs to score, not you. You saw the reaction of Bruno Fernandes behind, going like, let it roll, make a run, create space, so I can tap it in. It didn't happen.
Thierry Henry. Henry. There you go. 4 years of French.
Crushed it.
Ronaldo's being crushed after Portugal tied the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Formerly Zaire, the last time they were in the World Cup, which was in 1974, I believe I read. So Portugal is one of the favorites in this event, and they were a minus 350 favorite. They were a hefty favorite to win yesterday. Yesterday, they ended up in a 1-1 tie. Richard Jolly, Yahoo Sports, wrote, anything Lionel Messi could do, Cristiano Ronaldo couldn't do better. A day after the Argentinian began his World Cup in a manner to suggest his talent is timeless, his great rival started in a way to show his powers have waned with the passing of time. And then he actually writes that the Portugal team right now is a team made up of 10 men and a statue, the statue being Ronaldo. So I watched this game yesterday. I watched this game and I watched the England-Croatia game. Not as closely the England-Croatia game because I was recording my podcast. But anyway, that's beside the point. That was an exciting game. Harry Kane, unbelievable goal header in the first half, had a penalty kick, second opportunity on a penalty kick, and England beat Croatia. Croatia was in the final in 2018, I believe it was. In the World Cup. But I was watching Portugal, and like I watched Messi the other night, which, with Argentina, I was just kind of focused in on Messi. So I was just kind of focused in on Ronaldo. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really notice, and why would I? I'm far from, expert. I am, a complete novice when it comes to this game. But I didn't notice anything that looked so far off, that he looked so old at 41 years old and looked like, the Portugal team was playing 10 on 11. I didn't notice that personally. You mentioned to me, well, I'll let you describe why you think he is, on the verge of potentially being benched.
Well, so there was a play in, I think, around the 68th minute where Ronaldo sent it just wide right of the cage. But if you look at where the pass was going, and if you remove Ronaldo from there, it would have been a very easy goal for Portugal because he's standing right there in between.
This is the play that Thierry Henry is talking about.
Yes. That exact play. So the ball's going to go by Ronaldo, and he panics, tries to get a shot on, and sends it wide, when if he had just touched it, sent it back, it would have been the easiest goal for Portugal. They would have taken a 2-1 lead, and that would have been that.
Okay. Do you think they'll bench him? Because
No.
here's what Ronaldo said after the game. He said, nothing was lacking. That's football. Portugal could have won, but we could have lost. It wasn't the start we wanted, but this is far from over. He has not scored a non-penalty kick goal in a major international competition in 5 years. June 19th, 2021 was the last goal for Ronaldo in a major international competition. I would assume that's World Cup and Euro.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. looks like the coach is also suggesting, why would I take one of the greatest goal scorers of all time out of the lineup?
Exactly. They're not going to bench him or anything. It's just he needs to play better and honestly have a better sense of the team, I guess.
Yeah. Well, now, yesterday completed the all 48 teams playing their first of 3 group stage games. We're now into, starting today, we'll be into the second, games for all of these 48 teams, scattered across 12 groups of 4. And of course, the one that, people are waiting for here is tomorrow afternoon's U.S.-Australia game. The Australians beat Turkey. They apparently are a much better opponent than Paraguay was. So we'll see on that. And in terms of whether or not the U.S. struggles a little bit more in that game. Today, you get, I think, 4 games. I can't tell you of these 4 games is if there's a critical matchup for a team that's in trouble. Obviously, Spain and Portugal, 2 of the 5 or 6 favorites. Spain, was either the favorite or the second favorite with France. They're going to have to win a game here over their final 2 to probably move on to the round of 32. So their next game is a pressure game. I'm looking at the matchups today. I can't tell you who was supposed to be good and who wasn't. I know Mexico got a really good first win. They play South Korea tonight in Guadalajara. They played Mexico City, their first game. I'm assuming the U.S. is playing all 3 of their games in the U.S., that Mexico is playing all 3 of their group stage games in Mexico, and that Canada is playing all 3 of their group stage games in Toronto or Vancouver. That makes sense to me. Am I right about that?
I believe you're correct, but
okay.
After the round of 16.
Yeah, Canada's playing in Vancouver today. Mexico's playing in Guadalajara. And then I guess if we look ahead to next week, let's see where their next games are. Mexico's back in Mexico City and Canada's back in Vancouver. And so the U.S. is in Seattle, and then where is the U.S. after that? Then they're in SoFi. So they played the first game in SoFi, the second game in Seattle, the third game in SoFi. That makes sense, and that's the way it should be when you're the host countries, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every other host country gets to play all 3 of their group stage games in their host country, in their own country. So we have 3 countries that are hosting the North American, World Cup. They should be able to play all 3 of their games in their host country. That makes sense to me. We'll see. U.S. big one tomorrow against Australia. I'm enjoying it. The England game was great. Harry Kane was awesome in that game yesterday. And there was not only in that game, Max, you can attest, not only in that game was there a lot of scoring, 4-2, but man, there was a lot of action.
Oh yeah,
period.
It was a blast. It was a very fun game. I mean, it knew going in Croatia with how all their recent success going up against England with all their expectations that we were walking into a fun one, and boy, did they deliver.
All right. Chase Hughes from Monumental Sports will jump on with us next and explain to us why Trae Young, after getting traded to the Wizards, has declined his player option for next year. He's entering free agency. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, joining me right now is Chase Hughes from Monumental Sports. You can follow Chase on X at ChaseDC Sports. We will talk about this decision by Trae Young to opt out, to decline his player option for next year. We'll talk some draft. But let me just start with this, because we haven't talked since maybe, I don't know, second round of the NBA playoffs. What did you ultimately think about the last 2+ months of playoff action, and of course the finish with the Knicks winning the title?
Well, I thought it was honestly some of the most entertaining NBA playoffs that I've seen in years. I mean, the Thunder Spurs conference finals was incredible. It was the matchup I was hoping for with the NBA finals. I thought Wemby going into the Garden was going to be amazing to watch, and it was. And I just can't stop thinking, honestly, about Jalen Brunson's performance in Game 5. I was just looking it up yesterday, tied with Michael Jordan for Jordan's career high in a finals closeout game, 45 points, tied for the fourth most ever in that situation. The only one we've really seen that was better than that was Giannis in 2021, who had 50 points, also double-digit rebounds, of course, the block on DeAndre Ayton. But I find it incredible what Jalen Brunson did at 6'1", 6'2", opposite Wemby, who's 7'4", 7'5". And I think it's really fascinating that we can all see the trajectory for Victor Wembanyama. He's probably going to go down as one of the greatest players we've ever seen, maybe even the greatest of all time. And his legacy from here on out is going to help Jalen Brunson's legacy. Like, it's already incredible that he did that. But, like, what if Wemby becomes a top 3 player of all time? Like, what Brunson did will become even more impressive.
All right, I'll work the conversation back to what you just said about Wemby here in a moment. But, it was a phenomenal closeout performance, Chase. Unbelievable. And that 12 straight point stretch when they were down 10, was true, clutch delivering when it mattered the most. Jordan's 45, remember, came in that closeout game against Utah in 98. And I think there was a stretch in that game where basically he accounted for every point, in the fourth quarter. I will just tell you, because I'm older than you, there's no closeout game that comes close to what Magic did as a rookie in 1980. His 1980 playing center with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar out and back in Los Angeles in Game 6 in Philadelphia, where he went for 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists, playing primarily center when he had been the starting point guard as a rookie, is the greatest closeout performance in NBA history. But it was spectacular the other night. And by the way, I think you made a really good point. If Wemby becomes one of the greatest of all time, it will elevate that performance even more, even though we will talk about Wemby being, young, rookie, first playoffs, etc. But Brunson's performance was great. You and I are on the same page. I loved these NBA playoffs. I mean, I go back to the Denver-Minnesota series, which was so good. And then the Minnesota-San Antonio series was so intense. And the Oklahoma City-San Antonio series was off the charts. I'm wondering if you think what I think, which is if Jalen Williams plays in that series, Oklahoma City is in the finals, and I think Oklahoma City would have beaten New York. What do you think?
I would lean towards yes. And remember, Minnesota, Anthony Edwards hurt his knee.
Yeah.
Ayo Dosunmu, who was having a great playoff. Yeah, he got hurt. So, injuries and availability always seem to play a factor. And if you look at the Knicks, I believe Brunson and Towns played every playoff game, right? So it definitely comes down to that. And, when people are saying, like, oh, you got to trade Chet or you got to shake it up with the Thunder, it's like, no, they don't. They were missing who I think we all know now is their second best player. Nothing against Chet. It's Jalen Williams, and it's not close.
Right. And by the way, missing, AJ Mitchell for those last few games, the way he had played during the postseason didn't help. And, you go back to Denver, not having Aaron Gordon. Injuries, they're a reality. And it's what happened. But I actually think Oklahoma City would be my favorite going into next year. The Chet Holmgren performance, though, in Game 7 was startling. startling because it was fear related,
right?
Not it was anxiety related. It wasn't that he just had a bad shooting night. He didn't shoot. That was alarming.
100%. But here's the thing about the Thunder. They always have someone waiting in the wings, and they got a guy in Thomas Sorber, who people around here probably remember. He played at Georgetown.
Yeah, Georgetown. And
I'm not saying he's going to stop Wemby, but if you don't think Chet can go up against Wemby, you might want to try a guy who's about 260 with a 7'5" wingspan, who was unbelievable at forcing turnovers and getting rebounds in college. I mean, one of the best, most disruptive defenders we've seen come into the draft in the last 5 years. And they picked him in the lottery last year. He just didn't play because he had an ACL injury. So they've got someone that, at a minimum, they can try next time around.
So before we get to the Wizards and Trae Young in the draft and everything, there have been two massive storylines about the NBA Finals, and they're still continuing. The Knicks' performance, throughout Jalen Brunson's performance, but just the Knicks winning it because no one really had them winning it. They were the 3 seed. And by the way, we're down 2-1 against Atlanta in the first round. And the other big storyline is the incredible narrative change on Victor Wembanyama from the end of the Oklahoma City series and then 5 games later, what the world thinks of him now. Casual fans, hardcore fans, etc. So I'm wondering what you think and what you learned about Wemby during these NBA playoffs.
I learned on the court that he's more ready than I thought to do what he did. I mean, averaging what he did throughout the playoffs, going to the NBA Finals. I didn't think it would happen this early. In terms of his personality and his reputation, I'm just disappointed in the way people have reacted to it. Like, all these guys, they're put under a microscope. They all have their quirks. And in Wemby's case, he just seems to be more competitive than the average NBA superstar, to care more. I grew up watching basketball in the 90s and in the early 2000s. That's how I like my NBA superstars, right? I want them to be competitive psychos, if you will, like Jordan and Kobe and Kevin Garnett. So if that's who he is, and I don't have any reason to believe that it's performative or it's fake, he's obviously a bit of an oddball. Like, you heard the story of him like walking the halls of Madison Square Garden barefoot because he wanted to feel the arena or something after they won the game 4, I believe it was. Or game 3. So he's kind of obviously a little bit different, but it all goes back to just competitiveness and him having an edge. And I personally love that. And I think it's great for the league. If it ends up making him a villain, then I think that's more a sign of a change in, the younger generation, how they view athletes, and probably social media. From where I sit, I love when athletes care that much.
So I agree with you, and I too love the competitiveness. Like the comps to LeBron, not breaking through, right away with the Heat and shying away in this series against Dallas in 2011. That was legitimate. He literally shied away from the moment. Victor Wembanyama didn't shy away from anything. He is a competitive badass. So I would agree with you on that, and I prefer that. For me, though, what changed was 2 things. One, yes, you're right. From the beginning of the postseason, we weren't sure that San Antonio, as a first-time playoff team, could get to where they got to, and they did. So it looks like they exceeded expectations because they did. But by the time we got there, what I thought, Chase, was 2 things about Wemby. Number one is he's a dirty player. And there is a difference between being competitive, badass, chippy, protecting yourself, and being dirty. And by the way, I would chalk that up to immaturity. And I'll wrap this up with, or I'll preface this with, he's 22, he's immature, he's going to grow, and hopefully a lot of what has off-put me won't be an issue down the road. But number 2 is, just as a player, very, very unpolished, unfinished offensively. But beyond that, what is he going to be offensively? What is he going to develop into offensively? Hopefully it's a mix of everything, but hopefully it includes using his size more than he did closer to the basket more consistently.
It's an absolutely fair point about the dirty plays. I mean, hitting Mitchell Robinson in the face, sort of throwing Jalen Brunson's head downward. He's got to get that out of his game. We don't need to see that. I don't think anyone wants to see that. And then on the court, yeah, I think this was a measuring stick, and he came up short. You know, we went into that game, and my whole thought process was, okay, who is the cream that's going to rise to the top? Is it going to be Jalen Brunson? Is it going to be Victor Wembanyama? Maybe De'Aaron Fox after a rough game? You know, someone's going to have to elevate their game and take over. And it was Jalen Brunson. And, you know, that's why they play the games. And there's no excuse for Victor Wembanyama not being the guy to do that, right? Like, he very easily could have been the one who had 45 points in that game and extended the series, but it was Jalen Brunson. And so I think Jalen Brunson deserves a lot of credit, but certainly, you know, long-term, Victor Wembanyama is going to have to hope for better play if he gets back to that stage. I think he will, because there was no signature performance for him. If you really think about the series, his most memorable moments were those dirty plays and, you know, drawing a picture in a park in New York City. Like, there was no like signature game or play. When you get to that stage and you're an all-time great, you got to deliver in those moments. He's going to have plenty of more opportunities, I think. But yes, he didn't do it this year.
No, and I think it would have been very, very intriguing how the NBA would have handled a Game 6 had they made it through Game 5 on the obvious flagrant the taking away Jalen Brunson's landing space. Personally, I think he would have played, but it would have been totally justifiable to call that a flagrant after the fact and suspend him from Game 6.
Yeah, I think it was such a tightrope that the league was walking, because you could tell early in the series they were going to let them play. And then it just seemed like there were several instances as the series went on where the line was crossed, but the standard had been set. And, you know, you got to be careful suspending, you know, marquee players in big games. So it just kind of, for me, really illustrated the sort of give and take of NBA officiating on that stage, because we want to see them be able to play through contact, but how much is too much?
By the way, I haven't talked about this week. For those that missed it, these were the highest rated NBA finals since '98, Jordan against Utah. And if there had been a Game 6 or a Game 7, we would have very likely seen the most watched NBA games in over 3 decades, had it made it to a Game 6 or a Game 7. The playoffs are great. It's a great product. And I think one last thing just on Wemby, I think you nailed it, and that is, with all of the other stuff swirling around him, he could have quieted most of it by playing well when the games were on the line, and he didn't. He was not very good down the stretch in Game 4 as they blew that lead, and he wasn't very good in the closeout game in Game 5, and Jalen Brunson was. One last thing for you just in these playoffs, because I've talked about it for the last 2 months. I loved, you know, the 80s and the physicality of the 80s and the 90s, like you did, you know, it starting in the 90s. But, you know, the Celtics, Lakers, Sixers, Pistons, I mean, those were wars physically. We know that officiating changes in the postseason, but I felt right from the jump, Chase, that this was one of the most loosely officiated postseasons with more allowable contact than I can remember, especially on the perimeter and what defenders were able to do to primary ball handlers. I don't think I've ever seen that much allowable contact. What did you think?
I would agree when it comes to the NBA Finals, but there, of course, was plenty of discourse along the way, you know, relating to the Thunder and flopping and some of the movements that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would have to try to generate fouls. So I think it was probably overall, I would agree, but I think that is worth noting. One quick point, though, on the TV ratings, I love hearing that, because if you look at the highest TV ratings for the finals of the last few decades, it really spiked and was like the highest since Jordan when Kevin Durant was on the Warriors. And I was really disappointed to hear that. And I think this kind of disproves the theory that the NBA needs a dynasty to get big ratings. because it never made sense to me. Why would people, like, more people tune in to watch? I know it was a bunch of star players on the Warriors, but it was the least competitive NBA Finals I've ever seen in my life when they stacked the deck with Kevin Durant. So I'm glad that in this era of parity, if you get the right combination, you can have huge ratings, because I think the parity is good for the league. And now that people are watching to that degree, I think that's a huge positive.
Well, I think this was also unique in that you had New York and you had Wemby.
For sure.
There were two major things sort of conspiring together, because Oklahoma City, Indiana last year, parity, another new champion, another new matchup last year, but not great ratings. It's interesting because I actually did a call segment the other day, and I'll ask you, it sounds like you prefer where the league is right now, 8 straight, different winners, 8 straight different matchups versus the dynastic runs. You prefer this, correct?
I prefer this over the extreme other side, which was the Warriors with Kevin Durant. Like, if it is a dynasty, but it's not super predictable who's going to be in the finals or win the championship before the season even starts, I think that's bad for the game. It eliminates a lot of fan bases from even paying attention. I love the unpredictability of it. A dynasty is going to emerge at some point. You mentioned the Thunder. They could very easily have 2 straight rings if they stayed healthy.
Yeah.
So I think dynasties will still happen, but I just really had a problem with going into an NBA season and feeling like the entire regular season and the first few rounds of the playoffs were all just, there was no reason to even watch them because you knew what the end result was going to be.
All right, I'm going to circle back because I love having you on the show, because we can talk about the league, not just our own team, because I do think that the next few weeks are going to be very interesting league-wide. The Giannis thing, what will Denver do, anything? Because let's not forget, we're 3 years removed from thinking that Jokic and the Nuggets were going to become a dynasty, and that didn't happen. So real quickly, for everybody that may not know, just talk about the expectation going in that Trae Young would decline his player option and what happens next.
Yeah, so when the Wizards traded for Trae Young, that was something to note right away, that he had a player option worth about $48 million, I believe it is, for next season, $47 million. And in order to negotiate a new contract, he would have to decline that option. So obviously there's reports out there. If that does become official, it wouldn't be unexpected. That would be the first step towards brokering a new deal. And, until something unexpected happens, I don't think too much needs to be made of it. I think there were a lot of signs down the stretch of last year that it was a good partnership for both sides. And, I keep going back to just the idea of why they traded for Trae Young in February. They reviewed their roster. They really like the young talent they have, but they saw an opening and a need for someone who can get into the paint 10 plus times a game off the dribble and break down the defense. They've got a few guys who could develop into that over time. They're probably going to draft a player next week who could develop into that over time, but they don't have someone who can currently do it at anything close to Trae Young's level. So it seems like if Trae Young wasn't back next year, then they would create a need that they felt was pretty serious just a few months ago. So that's one of the many reasons why I feel like, that there's reason to believe that they'll come to some sort of agreement at some point.
What do you think the deal will look like?
That honestly is really hard to predict. I don't even know if I could throw a number out there.
Well, how many years do you think they'd want to lock him up for?
I mean, I've seen reports of like 3 years. I mean, obviously, if you're opting out of a 1 year deal, it's got to be at least 2. I would guess something in that range of 2 to 3 years. It could be interesting depending on who they pick in the draft. Maybe there's a succession plan at point guard if it's Darren Peterson. AJ DeBonsa, someone who I think you could build an offensive around. He's really good at breaking teams down off the dribble. He's actually a really good passer at finding guys on the perimeter. So I think they would be thinking in those terms, like, okay, we got Trae Young now. What's the plan after that, and how do their young players fit in?
What about Anthony Davis? Is there any possibility there's an extension this off season before next season begins, or will they just, deal with that this time next year?
I think there's definitely a possibility. He's got more years on his deal. He has a player option, but it's further down the road.
Yeah.
So he, I guess indicated obviously at his end of season press conference that he wanted to talk to the team about the future, but he really put it in terms of competing for a championship. So I don't think it's quite as pressing as it is with Trae Young, a new contract. I think for him, a lot of the conversation, I'm sure, already has been centered around, okay, well, what is this team going to do in the next 2 years to get close to competing for a championship? And, the last time we heard from him on that subject was before they got the first overall pick. So, he was the first overall pick himself. He played with Cooper Flagg last year, first overall pick. So I think he knows as well as anyone what that could do for a franchise. So we'll see. There hasn't really been anything new about him in the last few months, but
right.
The rubber's going to hit the road pretty soon because, free agency will open June 30th. And whatever the Wizards and him have decided, I think we'll know by their actions.
All right. Chase Hughes from Monumental Sports joining us. All right. So what do you want them to do Tuesday night, and what do you think they'll do?
Want them to do, I guess, in my heart of hearts, just probably keep the pick, I guess. Whether it's DeBonta or Peterson, I think it really just comes down to their preference. Both of those guys, they're different players, but they do similar things in that they're just incredible scorers with the ceilings to win scoring titles and be first team All NBA. But trades just get kind of tricky. So I've been asked a lot, like, will they trade back? I would expect them to keep the pick. Obviously, they got to weigh their options. I think they're continuing to weigh their options. But, the number one pick brings with it some gravitas and also, probably I would guess less second guessing. If you move back, you're evaluating a lot more factors in terms of the decision.
It sounds like you think a trade is at least a possibility.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's always something that teams have to explore. But I think even though it is rare, but in a year like this where there's little separating guys at the top, it does seem like it would be more likely. Like when it does happen, it's in situations like this.
Sure.
It's just a tricky proposition. I think if you have the number one pick, you want to come out of the draft with the best player in the draft. And one thing I've been looking up a lot is just, and I'm kind of amazed by, is there's usually a massive difference between the best player in the draft and the second best player in the draft, even when it doesn't seem that way at first glance. And usually the going rate to move back in the top 5 is an additional first round pick, and not a great one. Like the Hawks got the 10th pick to do it from 3 to 5. The Celtics got, I think it was the 19th pick from 1 to 3 when they got Jason Tatum. And so if you look at these drafts and go back and look, like sometimes the top 2 players are like Karl Anthony Towns and Devin Booker. And you might say, well, I'd rather have Devin Booker in the 10th pick than Karl Anthony Towns. But usually it's not close. It's like, would you rather have Rudy Gobert in the 10th pick or Giannis? And the best example I could find was James Harden is the second best player in his draft class. So would you rather have James Harden and the 10th overall pick or the best player from that draft class, which was Steph Curry? So like, I think you end up kicking yourself sometimes if you move back, because and I should say, if the Wizards did move back and got anything more than those teams got, that would be a pretty big win, because that seems to be the going rate.
The Wizards could have taken Steph Curry in that draft, but they traded the 5th pick
Indeed.
For Mike Miller and Randy Foye, because Abe wanted Flip Saunders in his first season to have the best chance possible of making the playoffs. All right, but you didn't answer the question. If they do pick, who would you prefer, DeBonta or Peterson?
I think DeBonta, it still seems like things are leaning that way in terms of the consensus. And I like DeBonta a lot. I mean, I like the idea. I know Ben Standig said this the other day, but I felt the same. Just the combination of floor and ceiling and off-court personality, I think that'd be great. But I'm really up in the air. I mean, Peterson, every time I turn on the film, I think, wow, this guy looks incredible.
Yeah,
right. I'm not surprised that the Wizards are taking their time, because This is an unusually tough call. And I've said previously, like, I think that's for the best. I think sometimes teams get the number one pick and there's a consensus and you'd be crazy not to take that guy. And then you take him and you understand that, you know, history shows the number one pick isn't always the best player in the draft. In fact, recently, oftentimes they aren't. And you kind of have to take that guy. So I think this allows for more creative thinking, but man, is it a tough call.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, you know, when the Wizards had Wall, which was an obvious number one pick. You know, in 2010, John Wall was the consensus number one. So they weren't faced with that like they were, you know, when Jordan made the pick in 2001. But in that draft, I think I looked this up a few weeks ago. I think it was Paul George basically ended up having the best career, but Wall was right there.
Right.
I mean, it was really close. All right. Real quickly, before I let you go, it's going to be an interesting next few weeks. So I'll just ask you real quickly. I'll give you a player name and you tell me what team he ends up on. Giannis.
Miami.
Okay. Then Jaylen Brown.
Stays with the Celtics.
Stays with the Celtics after all of this. That would be interesting. What about Kawhi
He had an
Leonard?
incredible year. He got MVP votes. I don't see. I mean, and their other best player, Jason Tatum, is still coming.
I would never trade Jaylen Brown for Giannis. By the way, I think Jaylen Brown is legitimately, and by the way, always available. I don't understand that unless it's just kind of worn out its welcome in the relationship with Tatum or the team isn't what they want it to be. Kawhi Leonard, does he stay with the Clippers?
Yes.
And then what do you think Denver does to help out Jokic?
Ooh, that's a great question. Probably get some additional scoring help. But, you know, health was a factor for them last year, and I don't think they're going to break up the Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic duo. So I'm guessing they don't end up doing anything extreme.
Thank you. Oh, LeBron.
Cleveland. I'll say Cleveland.
Well,
I think that would they were very close. I mean, how close could you get? They were in the conference final.
They were very close, but they were also kind
story.
of far. I mean, they were a conscientious objector in that series.
Yeah, right.
You're never, I just will never, ever believe that any team that has James Harden as their best player or second best player can win a title. No way.
Yeah, but LeBron would help. Maybe he feels like he could put them over the top, and him and Bronny can go back home.
Thanks for doing this. As always, enjoyed the conversation. Thanks, Chase.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin.
Chase Hughes, everybody. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. U.S. Open is underway. Shinnecock Hills, Southampton, New York. Sam Burns and Ludwig Oberge are tied atop the leaderboard, both at 2 under through 6 holes played. And then there are several players at 1 under par, including Rory McIlroy, Brooks Koepka, and Patrick Reed. Much of the field is way over par. The greens are not rolling at a ridiculous speed. I think they're 10 and a half. And there was major fog earlier this morning, but still you see it looks like of the players on the course right now, 52 of the 78 are over par. And only at this point, 10 are under par. This is, one of those tracks that typically produces even par or a little bit worse as a winning score. I love these U.S. Opens, and this is always a phenomenal track. It's very early, but there you go. Rory Koepka, a shot off, Sam Burns, and Ludwig. Interesting weekend for sure. The parade's going on in New York. Maybe a little bit more on that. There is some local sports news. ESPN reporting that the Caps have signed Spencer Carberry, their head coach, to a multi-year contract extension.
Woo!
This was for the 44-year-old Spencer Carberry, I think, an expected thing, even though they did not qualify for the Eastern Conference playoffs this past season. They did in 2025 win their first playoff series since winning the Stanley Cup in 2018. Caps GM and Senior VP Chris Patrick said, "We are pleased to extend Spencer to a new multi-year contract. Since joining our organization, Spencer has played an important role in the development of many of our young players while also earning the respect and trust of our veteran leaders." Closed quote. I will ask you, Max, the hockey expert on this show, 2 things. One, are you okay with the contract extension?
Absolutely.
Did you want that for Spencer Carberry?
Yes, I want Carbs in this town for as long as he wants to stay here.
And then 2, and it's a 3-part second question.
Oh boy.
Or 2-part second question, excuse me. Will Alex Ovechkin be back?
Well, there have been some postings, not by him, but by his wife on her Instagram story, just her working out, and he's right there with her, just pounding water and lifting heavy things. So he looks to be in shape, ready to come back. And one thing on the Caps just last year, they finished 12th in the league with 95 points. The Stanley Cup champion Las Vegas Golden Knights, Stanley Cup runner-ups, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, finished in 13th in the league with also 95 points. So it was just a really competitive year in the East this year. I'm going to chalk it up to that and make a bunch of excuses for him just because I like the guy so much. But I think that Ovechkin's planning on being back for another year. But we'll see. I just hope everything gets signed before the season starts.
Okay. The second part of question number 2 is, will John Carlson be back?
So this one is less of a known thing. I know the teams that were interested have been Anaheim. There's another team out west, but he already has informed the Ducks that he does not intend to re-sign with them, that he wants to move back east. A name of a team that I have been heard has been getting kicked around is the Philadelphia Flyers. Since that's pretty close to DC, I'm not 100% sure.
East, why wouldn't he want to come back to Washington? Is it that they wouldn't offer him a multi-year deal instead of a 1-year deal?
It would boil down to that, I believe, term, and then also just with how it all went down, the trade was rather unexpected. So I have a feeling it may have left a bad taste in his mouth, which I completely understand. But I don't know. I would love to see him back here, given how long he's been here. I like John a lot. He's been staple on this franchise for a really, really long time, but I don't know that he wants to come back, but I'm not sure.
All right, there you go. Spencer Carberry extended by the Capitals. All right, when we come back, there is some Brandon Ayuk news. I'm only talking about him if there's new news. And another receiver someone has suggested would be a good fit for Washington that we haven't talked that much about. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So yesterday during Jaden Daniels' press conference, Nikki Jhabvala from The Athletic now asked Jaden, well, will he be working out between now and training camp out in Los Angeles with Terry McLaurin and De'Ami Brown again? Here's what Jaden said.
Yeah, we'll get together. We'll get together at some point.
And then Ben added a question to Jaden's answer. Ben Standing did by saying, anybody beside those guys? Here's what Jaden said.
Anybody besides those guys? We'll get a little trip going on. We'll see. You guys probably see it on social media or something. Thank y'all.
So that answer had a lot of people thinking, anybody beside those guys? Of course, it could be, Treylon Burks. It could be Luke McCaffrey. It could be, who's the guy that everybody's raving about from UNLV? Whoever that guy is.
Van Jefferson?
The undrafted free agent.
Whatever.
It could be a lot of people. But, of course, the takeaway when he said, you guys will probably see something on social media and had a little bit of a grin was, will Brandon Ayuk be involved in some of those get-togethers? We'll find out soon. There was other news on Brandon Ayuk. I think yesterday, Jason Lockenfora. By the way, is Lockenfora, who does he write for? I don't even know anymore. Does he write for Yahoo? I think he writes for Yahoo. And he does the radio show in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
But Jason Lockenfora reported, citing multiple league sources, that the 49ers have reached a point where they simply want the administrative Brandon Ayuk headache resolved, and that they will officially cut ties with him and move on, with an outright release expected to occur before players report for training camp in late July. I'll believe that when I see it. He's a longtime NFL insider, so I'm sure he has sources that are telling him that, no doubt. And with that said, man, we all kind of got to know the Shanahans a little bit, and with what he's done on social media here recently, I just feel like heels are dug even deeper. But they have to get him reinstated. He's got to apply for reinstatement. Then he's got to show up or plan on showing up for training camp. And maybe that will be the key. If he's reinstated and they are, forced to take him off the reserved left squad list, maybe, just maybe, at that point, they'll cut ties with him and then he'll be available. We'll see what happens after that. I think most people assume that Washington would then go ahead and sign him. Man, that will be quite the moment if he's released and Washington a day or two later signs him. The only thing at this point that would really tick me off would be a trade for him, which is not going to happen, or a contract that has a lot of guaranteed money and some back-end hurt for the organization if it doesn't work out. This has to be a contract where he is in prove-it mode after 2 years of not playing, and at the very least, some erratic behavior. All right. Do you want me to take this for another 2 minutes and then we'll break at the top of the hour? Break for the top of the hour, or do you want me to break now?
No,
inside baseball stuff. What do you want me to do?
Let's take it to the top.
Okay, so I want to get to this. CBSSports.com has a story out, and it is it's ESPN.com. My fault. ESPN.com. Aaron Schatz, creator of the DVOA metric, by the way. Aaron Schatz wrote a column that appeared this morning, very early this morning, on ESPN.com, titled "Final NFL Offseason Moves for All 32 Teams, Trades, Signings, and More." And when he gets to Washington, of course, I was expecting to see the name Brandon Ayuk there. But I did not see that name. Well, the name that I saw was Tyreek Hill. Aaron Schatz writes, The caveat here is if healthy, but the Commanders could use a solid number 2 receiver and a field stretcher who is a step up from De'Ami Brown. They are currently 3rd in cap space, so the economics work for them. Jaden Daniels is a dynamic young quarterback who could get the ball out to Tyreek Hill. I think very early on we mentioned Tyreek Hill once or twice, but we haven't mentioned him a lot. But God, a healthy Tyreek Hill. Now let's talk a little bit about Tyreek Hill. The first thing is he is 32 years old. He is coming off a serious injury last year with the Dolphins, dislocated left knee, multiple torn ligaments, including the ACL. Indications were at the time when he had this surgery back in early October of last year that the surgery went well and that he would be all good and ready to play come the beginning of the 2026 season. He ended up playing just 4 games last year before the injury in Miami. And by the way, in 4 games last year, 21 catches, 265 yards. So he was already averaging, and he got hurt in that 4th game, already averaging 7 catches a game. I'm sorry. He was averaging just over 5 catches a game. Excuse me, just over 5 catches a game. But still dangerous, still a guy that, is fear-inducing to a defense. The year before, it was 81 catches, 6 touchdowns. In 2023, it was 119 catches, 1,800 yards, and 13 touchdowns. He's getting older. Washington doesn't seem to be into, older receivers. The analytics, discussion last summer with Terry McLaurin as to why they didn't want to give him the deal that Terry wanted was a part of the calculus. And maybe that's why they're not interested in Diggs. And maybe that's why they would not be interested in Tyreek Hill. But man, Tyreek Hill, and I'm talking about Tyreek Hill, the way he has played on this team this year with Jaden Daniels and Terry and Chig. By the way, he had Stephon Diggs landing with the Raiders of all teams. The Raiders are very short on wide receivers right now. They've got obviously a big-time tight end and a running back that they believe in. They drafted him pretty high last year as a rookie, but they don't really have any big-time wide receivers. So he had Diggs going to the Raiders. He had Deebo Samuel signing with the Chiefs, which I thought was kind of interesting. And he did not have, at this point, Brandon Ayuk with anybody else except for the 49ers as they try to clean up that situation. Tyreek Hill. What do you guys think about Tyreek Hill? If he's healthy, 32 years old, and he's out there over the next month getting ready to report to a training camp, ready to play, how interested would you be in Tyreek Hill? 301-230-0980. Aaron Schatt says the right fit is Washington. What if Tyreek Hill was healthy and ready to roll for 2026 and could be had on a 1-year deal? Would you want Washington to do that? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan showed the Team 980 in the team980.com. Terry McLaurin spoke from Minicamp today. We'll have some of that for you this hour of the show. Last Minicamp opportunity before we then dial in on training camp at the end of July. First preseason game, if you are wondering, is on August 14th, a Friday night against Miami. Remember, they have, I think, an intra-squad practice with Miami scrimmage that week leading into that first preseason game. Then they're at Detroit on August 22nd and home against Baltimore on August 28th. Can't wait for the conversations about how much the starters should play in the preseason. Maybe with Dan Quinn's new attitude about more urgency and more competitiveness, maybe we'll see more starters in preseason games. But I doubt it. That's my guess. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Aaron Schatz, ESPN yesterday, early this morning, wrote that for 32 teams, the best remaining fit in terms of a player that's not currently on the roster. And he writes that Tyreek Hill would be a good fit for Washington. Tyreek Hill had the serious injury early last season, apparently is okay. He's 32 years old. Look, he is, I think at times during his career, certainly in Kansas City and maybe even those first 2 years in Miami, you could easily make the case that he was the most feared non-quarterback in the league when it came to having to game plan for him. There may not have been a more electric, more elusive player in the NFL, and probably no player in the league for a few years that was more capable of touching the ball and going the distance. And, you know, when I had Dan Quinn on the show 2 months ago, I said, you know, what out of this year would you like to see change in terms of on the field, you know, productivity? And he said, we need guys who can rush the passer and who can score from anywhere on the field on offense. They obviously went out and addressed pass rusher. They haven't yet found that player necessarily that we know of. Maybe it's Antonio Williams that can score from wherever they touch the ball on the field. Tyreek Hill from a few years ago would fit that description. But here are options right now, right? Ayuk and Hill, two guys who, you know, one guy who hasn't played in 2 years and is a bit nuts. One guy who's been a little bit off kilter throughout his NFL playing career, if not dangerous, and hasn't had one of those true dominant seasons for a few years. And Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is actually the safest of the three. Who knew? 301-230-0980. Let's go to Ian. Ian's in early on this call topic. Go ahead. Tyreek Hill, yes or no?
No, but look, you're right. Of the three, I would go Diggs, Hill, Ayuk in that order. But I said to Max, it amazes me that we're here, that we are in June, and we are pontificating three wide receiver options, where to say they are character flawed, old, injured, haven't been good in a long time is an understatement. And it's amazing to me that with Diggs, I find myself now being like, why not Diggs? Because interesting listening to his comments. It sounds like he'd be open, but doesn't sound like Washington's front office is open to him. And I feel crazy saying this, but I don't get what's happening. I feel like everything is all about Ayuk, and it's to appease Jane Daniels or his mother.
I feel like every time you call, we have to walk through this step by step. What would your solution have been in this offseason? They signed more new players than any team in the league. They spent the third most money of anybody in the league. They went after the number one receiver in free agency in Alec Pierce, didn't get him. They went after the number 3 receiver in free agency, actually probably the number 2 receiver in free agency in Romeo Doubs, and didn't get him. It's not been from a lack of trying. What else should they have done?
So 2 things. I'm glad you asked this again. So you wanted Juwan Jefferson. Why didn't they go after
Juwan
him?
Jennings.
Juwan Jennings.
Yeah.
He was there. And when you say they went
let's
after
be
Pierce,
clear on Juwan Jennings. I clearly overstated his market. A lot of other people did too. He didn't sign in free agency wave 1 or wave 2. And then when he finally got around to signing with somebody, it was a 1-year deal for not a lot of money. So clearly the market overall told you what Washington clearly felt about Juwan Jennings, and that was they weren't super interested, not certainly at a price that maybe he was looking at. So I don't know that was a big whiff, because it's not like they had to battle anybody else. He was sitting there forever.
So that brings the perfect point. So would you rather have Juwan Jennings at his price than be waiting for Brandon Ayuk at whatever low price he is? I think my
aren't you? Don't you
Kevin,
feel like the Juwan that we like? Maybe you felt the same way about Juwan Jennings. I don't know if you did or not. I actually really like Juwan Jennings as a player, and I think he would fit in this offense. Now, he's not an explosive player, but he is a great team player, blocker, the whole thing. But nobody wanted him in free agency until 2.5, 3 months into free agency. So the league clearly knows a lot more than we know. So I'm okay with the fact that they didn't sign Juwan Jennings, because it's not like they couldn't have. Everybody in the league had a chance to do it. But go ahead.
So 2 points. One, by that logic, the league has a chance to sign Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, and nobody's doing that. So what does that tell you?
Well, I think there's a little bit of a difference here. And the difference is that, well, first of all, Brandon Ayuk's not available, but you didn't say those two.
No, I said
with Diggs and
Hill.
With Diggs and Hill, they are both players, that are older. Hill coming off a major injury, and it's very possible that both players, who, by the way, remember, Diggs was also in a trial, fighting off strangulation felony charges during the first part of free agency, and had to have that cleared. And I think what we also learned recently is that he had to be cleared in terms of the league not assessing any sort of suspension based on violation of the personal conduct policy, which they cleared him from. And now you get into that situation, which you get into a lot of years, which is some of these veteran players, they actually don't want to sign now until they're clear of OTAs and minicamps. So I would expect that Diggs will sign with somebody certainly before training camp. And maybe that's his intention at this point. But they tried, Ian. They wanted Alec Pierce. They were interested and made an offer to Romeo Doubs. It takes two. Those two players decided on different options.
So then I would ask you the question.
And I think they would have drafted Carnell Tate. I think there's a chance they would have drafted Carnell Tate had Tate not been picked much earlier than people thought.
So on the Romeo Doubs point, the Alec Pierce, he really wanted to stay in Indianapolis. I get that. On the Romeo Doubs part, there's a 2-part question back to you is, why didn't they overpay like you wanted them to on Tyler Linderbaum? I think their desire to maximize production per dollar is very Lerner-esque, and instead of overpaying for some upper-end talent. And then second, what does it tell you about Doubs and these other receivers that they aren't choosing Washington? I thought that survey said that
we had more new players signed in Washington during this last offseason than any team in the league. Washington attracted the most new players of any team in the league.
They are just guys. Kevin,
they're not just guys. Adafiowe and some of these others had lots of options. Let me just quickly answer your first part there. First of all, Tyler Linderbaum is a much different prospect at his position than Romeo Doubs is. Tyler Linderbaum is now in a 4-year player who's made the Pro Bowl the last 3 years. He is an A+ player. I wouldn't say that about Romeo Dobbs. I would say in a season in which there wasn't great, depth or great and marquee value at the wide receiver position, he was just one of the better guys available. But no one's going to mistake Romeo Dobbs for like an elite wide receiver. Tyler Linderbaum is an elite level offensive lineman and center. So that's my answer to that. What else you got?
The second part of the question, what does it tell you that people like Dobbs didn't choose Washington? Because I thought Quinn was so popular and Jane Daniels is so great.
Clearly he is. Clearly he is. They signed more new players than any other team in the league. You can't get all of them. You can't get all of them. Some players actually have a preference on a coach that they've got a relationship with or a place they'd rather be for whatever reason. But if you're about to say that this isn't a destination when they signed more new players in free agency than any other team in the league, I can't help you with that one. And if you think it's because all of those players didn't have other options, that's just not true. They did.
Those players,
they were sought after. Many of them were.
They were not. I'm telling you over and over.
Chenal, Owe, Chason, Nick Cross, these guys had options.
Guys, they are just.
Well, Owe, I don't think is going to be just a guy. But let me just tell you something. Alec Pierce and Romeo Dobbs aren't like stars. They're at the same level, if not a little bit less than Owe. Tyler Linderbaum was a star. I would have actually been okay had they overpaid him. He's a legit star.
I agree. But I think the bigger point is we are now in the middle of June, and we are debating between three old, injured, and crazy
Well, that's all that's left.
Wide receiver, too.
I mean, I'd like to trade for Jamar Chase, but he's not available.
But why do other teams – how do other teams trade for a Myles Garrett and impactful players, and Washington is not doing the same? Like,
give me the other example. I mean, I guess they could have tried to trade for A.J. Brown, but do you think the Eagles were going to trade A.J. Brown within the division?
Why not? Maybe they would have. How do you know they wouldn't have?
Well, who knows? Maybe Washington was interested. I doubt Philly would have traded A.J. Brown within the division. I think that is highly, highly unlikely that would have happened.
Right. I just think, Kevin, at some point, your desire to like Peters and Jane Daniels has to be met with, why is our roster at this point in June with Jane Daniels here? Like, I think that just has to be asked.
You have to meet with the reality of, why didn't they do anything at wide receiver? Why don't people like to come here with the reality that, A, it wasn't a big wide receiver free agency offseason, and Washington signed more new players than any team in the league. So clearly it wasn't a destination that repulsed players. You're way off on that. I would love Adam Peters to have provided more for Jaden Daniels, which is why I am still considering that they might be considering somebody like Brandon Ayuk. But you have to have there have to be options out there. Like, there weren't many options. There just weren't. And they tried on the two that led the free agency market. All right, I got to go. I got to take another call here. Let's go to Anthony. Anthony, Tyreek Hill was actually the conversation. Aaron Schatz at ESPN says that Tyreek Hill would be a good fit in Washington. What do you think?
So real quick, I think Ian has a problem accepting that the players actually have choices in this because there are so many factors that go into it. Your family, kids in school, all that stuff. Do you want to move across the country? So
I'm glad they didn't sign Alec. I'm glad they didn't sign Alec Pierce, to be honest with you. I mean, I think it was too much money for that player. But
right. So as far as Hill goes, if Tyreek Hill is 90% back, hell yeah, you sign him for a 1 year deal.
90% is all you need. Yeah.
The only problem, if both he and Terry ball out this year, you got to keep somebody. You can't get rid of both of them. That's the problem.
Anthony, I really hope we're faced with that offseason decision in 2027.
Well,
I think if you think you can get Tyreek Hill, the Tyreek Hill that we NFL fans know, you absolutely consider that. Now, the other part of that is what's the dynamic with him, and culturally, they got to feel comfortable with him. By the way, I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to end up in Kansas City, personally. I think he's going to be back with Andy Reid. I think that's where he ends up in 2026. But, all of the due diligence stuff that we don't get to see, that we don't get to ask, that we don't get to hear answers to, are the things that they have to get comfortable with on all three of the players we're talking about. Diggs, Ayuk, and even Hill. But Hill, in terms of the kind of player he is and the fit, and by the way, he'd be coming from, a Shanahan-style offense in Miami, then, that would be an interesting fit to see Tyreek Hill out on the field for our offense next year. What else you got, Anthony?
The reality of the situation is, other than Ayuk, Hill and Diggs, they probably won't sign until sometime into training camp.
Or just before it, yeah.
Exactly. So there's nothing imminent coming from either one of those camps. So then just have to play the prolonged waiting game if you want either one of those players. But Hill at 90%, without a doubt.
Everybody on hold, stay there. Tyreek Hill was suggested as a good fit for Washington in a story on ESPN.com written by Aaron Schatz. Tyreek Hill is recovering from that severe knee injury week 4 last year in Miami, but is expected to be ready for the beginning of the 2026 season. Certainly, I think Tyreek Hill at 32 years old is a 1-year deal. There's some max money and even some perhaps guaranteed money for Tyreek Hill, as there may be with Stephon Diggs as well, but it's not going to be something that's onerous by any stretch of the imagination. Would you be interested in Tyreek Hill here in Washington? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. By the way, if you listen to the podcast of this show, if that's how you typically listen to it, please rate and review the show, especially on Apple and Spotify. It's huge for us to get ratings and reviews for the podcast of this radio show. And follow us as well. Hit the plus button or the follow button. The golf right now, the U.S. Open's first round underway. Out of 78 players on the course right now, only 5 are under par, and they're all 1 under par. Burns, Ludwig Orberg, Patrick Reed, Brian Harman, and Ben James are all 1 under par. The rest of the field over par. This is going to be more likely than not a U.S. Open that's won with an over par or around even score. Let's just see some of the other big names. Rory's even. Scheffler's even through 5. Rory's even through 8 holes. Shooting even par is going to be a good score today, it would appear. Because typically the afternoon when the winds pick up, it's even harder when the course dries out a little bit. So we'll see what happens this afternoon. Meantime, the Knicks, by the way, are parading down the streets of New York. I think the parade started in true downtown Lower Manhattan, and it's heading up towards City Hall. And it looks like hundreds of thousands to perhaps millions are lining the streets for this parade. This is one of those true, ticker tape, celebratory parades for a sports team in New York. And that's, those are the parades that all others get judged by in terms of the look and the feel. All right. Aaron Schatz at ESPN. Aaron, of course, was the creator of the DVOA metric. Aaron came up with 32 last-minute fits for every team, last-minute additions for every team in the league, and he believes that Tyreek Hill would be the correct addition for Washington, writing, the caveat here is if he's healthy, but the Commanders could use a solid number 2 receiver and a field stretcher who is a step up from De'Ami Brown. They are currently 3rd in cap space. Economics would work for them. Jaden Daniels is dynamic and could get the ball out to Hill. I mean, just envisioning the Tyreek Hill of Kansas City and of the first 2 years in Miami on this team with Terry and with Chig and everything else they have. I mean, I'm telling you, I believe that Tyreek Hill over the last 10 years would be at the top of the list in terms of the players that kept offensive coordinators up at night more than any others that weren't quarterbacks. Tyreek Hill would be that player. Are you okay, or would you be okay if they added Tyreek Hill? Let's go to our guy, Samaj. Samaj, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, how you doing, buddy?
What's up, Samaj?
Happy Thursday, Friday, guys.
Yep.
Coach, my take on this is, I'm weighing the risk versus the reward and the reality. And as far as I know, it's still a rare thing for any skilled athlete to have a knee injury, let alone a blowout, like a complete blowout like Tyreek had, and be able to come back from it mentally within the first year. Now, if he's given a clean bill of health, I'm pretty sure it's going to be all physical. And it's the mental part. And a guy like Tyreek, if he ain't all there mentally to use that fully reconstructed knee, which I doubt he would be his first year back, I'd rather go with either Keenan or Diggs or some of these other guys. Those other guys are facing decline versus Father Time. Hill is going up against Father Time and the mental hurdle of coming over a complete knee blowout. I'd rather take the one risk with Father Time and decline versus the double combo. So that's my take on it, man. I appreciate you guys taking my call.
I think that's reasonable. I don't have the data in front of me that would reflect first year back off of a serious knee injury for a wide receiver. But what you say is kind of, it makes sense to me that it would take some time and some of it would be mental. And I mean, they'd have to obviously, figure out whether or not he's ready. Look, all 3 of the players that we're talking about, Ayuk, Diggs, and now Tyreek Hill in this conversation, I don't think Keenan Allen, quite honestly, would be an option for them, even though from a character standpoint, he'd be number 1 on the list. He'd fit into this culture. He'd be an incredible locker room and leader. But he, at his age now, he's never had a second gear. He's a possession receiver, a damn good one.
He's always been a possession.
Yeah, but they probably look, at Burks and, others as, maybe even a Van Jefferson as
And
you know,
they
guys that are
obviously-
similar to Keenan Allen at this point. Thanks so much.
I got you.
Appreciate
Oh,
it. Let's
always,
go to
man.
TC. TC, go ahead. Tyreek Hill has been suggested for Washington as an addition here before training camp. Would you do it?
I have to pump my brakes a little bit with it, Kevin, because just like you said, I was just listening to Samaj and what y'all was saying. I'm in the same boat about the injury. You're coming back off the injury, so he's not going to be. It's going to be a mental thing for him. If anything, if I'm gonna go to somebody with the age, I would go after Diggs more so than anything. But the question that I have is that we got all this going on, and what Washington did. Why wasn't there more emphasis on a trade for Brian Thomas with Jacksonville? The younger guy play with Jaden and be there for the years to come. I don't understand.
Well, doesn't it say something to you that Jacksonville was rumored to have him available at the trade deadline and then after the season, and no one is interested in him? I think he's got a big drop rate. That's one of the issues, but there may be other issues there as well.
From what I heard, some of it was the fact that it was something with the coaching staff and him. Far as the receiver coach that went over there, came over there.
Okay, so why wasn't anybody interested in trading for him?
I don't know.
If he was available.
That's what I'm saying. I haven't. That's what I'm saying, Kevin. We hear about, you said there's no one interested and available, but we didn't hear anything. Why Washington didn't kick the tires? I don't hear no reporters, no beat reporters saying, hey, did you think about that or get any information on that or whatever the case may be? There's no inside information on that.
No, I agree. The only thing you're right. The only thing we know is that there was a lot of reporting before the trade deadline last year during the season that Brian Thomas Jr. was available. Now, we got to the trade deadline and we weren't interested in making moves anyway because of the way the season was going. But nobody was interested, we think, or let me just say this. Nobody did trade for him.
Draft or whatever case may be.
What'd you say?
I'm talking about this year's draft. I ain't necessarily, I'm referring to in this year when we went through the draft. I'm not just saying during the trade deadline. I'm just saying anytime now.
No. You want
up here talking about
wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm clear on this. You're saying why hasn't Washington shown any interest in Brian Thomas Jr., correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Period.
I can't answer the question.
Whether it's last year or this year. That's
right.
What I'm saying.
Can't answer the question. The only thing that I can lend to this is that there was a lot of reporting that Brian Thomas Jr. was being made available by the Jacksonville Jaguars, a playoff contender in the moment, at the trade deadline last year. This is a player in his second season, and they were ready to move on from this player midway through his second season on a team that was a playoff contender, and they didn't make the trade. It may be that they were asking too much. It also may be that no one was interested. But you also have to wonder, why would Jacksonville want to move on from a rookie contract player in the midst of a playoff season? So there were a lot of red flags around Brian Thomas Jr. That's all I'm saying. Not to mention he had a pretty high drop rate. So those would be the reasons I would suggest he's not with not only Washington, but not another team too. And he's back with Jacksonville. And we'll see. Maybe there was an issue there that we don't know about that everybody else knows about. I can't answer the question. I can only lend it perspective, which I just did. Thanks, TC. Appreciate it. Let's go to JYD. JYD, Tyreek Hill, yes or no?
Yes, I would, but it won't happen simply because Mr. Pompous won't do it.
Who's Mr. Pompous again? Sorry.
Peters. The general manager.
Right. Why is he pompous again?
He just has that type of attitude.
Just
about
looks like he is.
And to me, and look, everybody has their own opinion. I don't think he's the general manager that everybody thinks he is. I just don't think that.
Okay.
But
all right, but back to Tyreek Hill. Would you want them to try to do it?
Yes, he should try to do it, but like I say, he won't do it. The only person who has a slight chance of coming here, and that is Ayuk. He's the only person. Look, Peters is also stubborn. He feels that Jefferson and Treylon Burks and De'Ami Brown are good enough really to fit over there on that side. Now,
his actions early in free agency would certainly indicate that he was hoping to do better than that, right? I mean, they are where they are right now, but it's not because this is what they wanted to do and where they wanted to be. They wanted Alec Pierce. They wanted Romeo Doubs. They wanted a true number 2 as part of the roster. They just struck out on both of those players.
The only thing I can say is that Van Jefferson has a chance because he had some he made some good catches.
I like
when he
him.
Was with the Rams.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, as far as Treylon Burks, I don't know why everybody that I have listened to on the radio and everybody and the junkies and everybody in the morning and everything else, this guy Treylon Burks has been in the league for a long time. Yes, he was a number 1 receiver. He didn't do anything for the Titans. When he came here, he made one circus catch, and everybody thinks that he is the next George Pickens.
JYD, he's only been in the league. He was drafted in 2022, so he hasn't been in the league for a long period of time. He was drafted in the first round.
How long does it take to make your bones?
Well, you just said he's been in the league for a long time. So do you consider 4 years a long time? He's still on his rookie contract.
For wide receiver,
or he just came off his rookie contract because they didn't sign him to the 5th-year option.
It's pitiful out there.
Okay. And he was with 3 teams in Tennessee that just weren't very good offensively and at the quarterback position.
Why didn't he do more when he was here?
Well, he didn't get here until week 8 or week 9, whatever week that was.
All he made was one catch?
Well, he actually had more than one catch, but he did have a memorable catch. That's true against Denver on that Sunday night. Thank you, JYD. Appreciate it as always. Let's go to our guy, Ivan in Florida. Tyreek Hill, yes or no?
Kevin, this is sort of, it angers me a little bit, but I got to admit, I don't know the whole story. But out of Ayuk, Hill, and Diggs, any of the 3, Kevin, better than that, 2 of the 3. Listen, I don't know the whole story, but Ayuk's availability obviously is not in our hands or his hands. And Diggs had at least some legal issues, but they're behind him. And Hill might have some injury considerations, so we don't know the whole story behind. I'd be interested to find out if the team has reached out to either Diggs or Hill. I wish I knew that. But what I don't get, Kevin, is a team doesn't appear from the outside. They don't appear to be all in on maximizing Jaden's rookie contract and the playoff window it presents. Now is the time to me to roll the dice, and it appears that that we have a lot, if not all, of our eggs in one crazy basket. And IU, I'd be interested if they've reached out to any of it. But it seems entirely possible we could get Ayuk and one of the other ones. But it's like, come on, man, get off the pot. Do something.
So you're taking a bit of the Ian path here, and my pushback to it would be, they went out and signed basically 6 or 7 new defensive starters. That's significant to the offense and to the football team because their defense has been a major liability. Well, let me back up. They spent the 3rd most money in free agency. They signed the most players of any team in free agency. They added perhaps as many as 6 to 7 new starters on defense, and they tried to add more offensively at wide receiver, but they struck out on Alec Pierce and Romeo Doubs. So they turned to De'Ami Brown and Van Jefferson, but they did sign one of the top 2 tight ends in free agency in Chigakonkwo. So the idea that they're not trying to improve the football team and by extension take advantage of Jaden's rookie contract, I just think is not correct. Now, back to what you started with, why don't they just go for it and sign two of these guys? I'm with you, but we don't have enough information. I don't want them to take two of these three if two of these three are hurt and crazy. So there's just not a lot of info out there.
Kevin, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. But it's not that I don't care what we've done so far. We've done some good things, and I'm excited about what we've done. But it doesn't mean anything. It's about we're talking about what we should do right now, which is, you would be angry. You said you're going to be angry if we trade or overpay for IU. What I'll be angry about is if IU gets unstable and then we wind up with D, none of the above. That's what I would be angry about. And Kevin, we need all the weapons possible for the 7-game stretch that we got.
Look, you're suggesting that there's a risk in not signing him if he becomes available. I understand that. That's not nuts, but I would want them to do it responsibly, is what I'm saying, Ivan. I don't want them to put themselves into a position where they really can't move on from a person that ends up having some issues and is not a good fit. That's all.
Kevin, get some info for us, Kevin. Have the Skins reached out to Hill or Diggs? Kevin, we need to try to get as many weapons as possible. We got a 7-game stretch comes out that's going to be a gauntlet, and we need all the help we can get. And standing pat or depending on serendipity, it's not the right model. Kevin. Hey, Kevin, do some info for us, man. Just find out.
Well, let me just say this back to the second point that I refuted. What I'm excited about right now is the chance that they completely turn around defensively, and that ends up being a big part of a successful 2026 campaign. I'm focused on at times. A lot of the fans are focused on, why doesn't Jaden have more weapons? Adam Peters said it early on after the season ended, that we can help Jaden by improving our defense as much as we can by adding other players offensively. I totally agree with that statement, and they backed it up by going out and adding 6 to 7 new major contributors and canning their defensive coordinator and hiring a new one. So I'm looking forward to actually having a team that defensively doesn't rely on the offense to score 30 plus to have a chance. That would be nice.
Stop it, Kevin. We've got $43 million or however much we've got to spend. Spend it. Let's get somebody. Do some intel, Kevin. Find out. We need to have 2 of the 3, Kevin.
I'm willing, and I think they're willing to spend it, but there isn't much to spend it on anymore. And so you got to let it play out. They can't go get Ayuk yet. He's not available. As far as Diggs and Hill go, Kevin, I'll try to find something out for you. I don't know anything specific to either one. Thanks, Ivan. Thank you, hit him straight. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. If you're on hold, we'll take a few more calls on this. ESPN.com suggests Tyreek Hill as a good fit for Washington. Would you be okay with Tyreek Hill here in D.C.? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. All right, we have put up our Waldorf Honda poll of the day on X. Max has titled the question, ESPN's Aaron Schatz says the Commanders should look into signing Tyreek Hill. Would you prefer him over Ayuk or Diggs? Hell yes or hell no? You can vote right now by going to @Team980 on X. The minimal amount of votes that are in right now have hell no at 80% and hell yes at 20%. Yeah. I just want help, but I don't want crazy help. And I don't want expensive help when there's a possibility that you're bringing on crazy. Our Twitter poll of the day is driven by Waldorf Honda. It all starts with a click, waldorfhonda.com. Yes or no on Tyreek Hill? I'll give you a U.S. Open leaderboard update here momentarily. Philip, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
How's it going, guys?
Good.
I say no. It's going to be too much to deal with. With that injury, we need guys now from week one. I don't agree, possibly having Tyreek Hill possibly ready by, mid-season. That's just, I don't think it's worth it, even for the next year. I feel with the new scheme with Blau, I think that's huge, tight end heavy. I love tight ends. So I think we have enough weapons, in my opinion. We don't need anything else. Granted, there's injuries. It's unfortunate for Tyreek Hill. He's a great player. But I feel we should just keep the guys that we have right now, and add during free agency. It shouldn't have to be just one receiver. It should be as a whole. And I think Kingsbury left a lot. He held back with the tight ends, and even with the running game. And now I think it's going to be different. It should be different. With the tight ends, work the inside to the outside. That's all I have to say.
All right. Thanks for the call. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think one of the things to emphasize, and we've talked about it previously, is that the new David Blau system is more likely than not going to result in more 12 personnel, one back, two tight ends, and even 13 personnel, one back, three tight ends, much more so than what they've had the last 2 years with more 11 personnel, which is one back, one tight end, three receivers. So with one back, two tight ends, you only have two receivers on the field at one time. One back, three tight ends, you only have one receiver on the field. I think that's, and we've seen an emphasis on tight ends. They went out and made one of their biggest free agent signings, a tight end in Chigakonkwo. They're bringing back John Bates. They seem to have featured Ben Sinnott a little bit more. And I'm just going to continue to throw this name out until he gets released in August. I know that last summer they really liked Lawrence Cager as a pass-catching tight end. Big dude, played in the preseason. I'm not saying that his preseason results are the reason that I liked him. I'm just telling you that I talked to people that said they really think that he has a chance, and he's been in the league for a while too. It's 4 or 5 years with 4 or 5 different teams, but he's got size at 6'5", 6'5 and a half, 225, 230, can run, has good hands. So there's a lot to watch here with the tight end position in the offseason, but there's no doubt that it probably makes the urgency to take a risk on a wide receiver a little bit less because of the number of times they'll be out on the field. With that said, do they have a true game-breaking wide receiver? We think they do in Terry McLaurin, but after that, what do they have? We're not sure about any of the rest of it. Look, I think you can make the case, and I've made this before, and I know this doesn't make all of you thrilled, but after Terry's season last year, being injured, missing a lot of games, and look, he wasn't with his quarterback. He played 2 games with Jaden Daniels last year. But is his age going to mean that what the front office in Washington believes, which is once you turn 30 and you get into your early 30s, there's more chance at injury. Your production rates drop at wide receiver. We'll see. My guess is Terry's such a pro, he's going to be in great shape. He's going to be ready to roll. But you need another receiver. I don't care how many tight ends you have out on the field. What they really need more than anything else, and don't even think receiver, they need another deep threat. They need another scare the defense player. Like, whoa, that guy can take us over the top. Because what that does is it makes it easier. It spaces out the defense. It leaves more room underneath, more room in the middle of the field on, medium level throws. When you have somebody who threatens a defense vertically, more than one, you benefit from that. And that's really, I think, what they need more than anything else. The golf is underway. Shinnecock Hills in Southampton, way out in the lovely Hamptons. Some of the shots of the Hamptons. You got to have big dough to be out in the Hamptons, that's for sure. But the course is right now brutal through the early portion of round one. Just 6 players of the 78 on the course are under par. Just 6. And just 17 out of the 78 are even par or better. Ludwig Oberge just took the lead outright by birdieing number 1. He played the back 9 first. He's on his 10th hole. He is 2 under par on the day. Everybody's thought for a while he will be an eventual major champion. And then there are 5 players currently at 1 under in that group. Sam Burns and Patrick Reed would be the biggest names. Rory's even par. Fleetwood's even par. Keegan Bradley's even par. Koepka's at 1 over. Scheffler's at 1 over. The course playing very difficult. Very difficult. All right. We are off tomorrow, as is everybody at the station for Juneteenth. So we'll be back on Monday, but stay tuned. Chris Russell is up next.